Before I go any further, just a reminder that there will be spoilers in this review. I'll give you a second to click out, go watch the film, I'll put the link in the description, you can come right back. What's up guys, welcome to Revelry Reactions. I'm Andre and it's just gonna be me today. Today we're reacting to the new Voldemort Origins of the Heir fan film that came out a couple of days ago. I was really confused about where this movie was coming from. I remember when the trailer came out and people were just pumped because they thought it was an official thing, that Warner Brothers was producing it. Turns out that wasn't the case. Warner Brothers had to come out and say, no, this is unofficial, we're not producing it, it's fan film. So this is produced by Triangle Films Productions. It's written and directed by Gian Maria Pizzato, if I said that right. And like I said, it is a fan film, so I'm going to try to review it as such. I'm not gonna try and hold it to the same standards as, you know, your typical Hollywood movie, as some reviewers typically do, not to be shady. The story essentially opens with Gracia McLagan infiltrating what I can only assume is the Russian Ministry of Magic. It's not quite clear, but she's definitely looking for something. She's, you know, dueling with oars left and right and getting to the evidence room, and essentially she gets caught. And we sort of figure out and we get to see how Tom Riddle essentially became Voldemort. So my first thoughts as I started watching this was an extremely well-made movie visually. And I say visually for a reason, and I'll get to that later. Right off the bat, the visuals are very, very professional looking. You know, the color grading is very good. The resolution is always up to par as well. And after a while, I started to notice something a bit weird, is that all the dialogue seems to be overdubbed. And this is not a hidden fact. It's in the credits that they had people revoicing the characters. The problem that I'm kind of struggling with is, you know, this kind of extent of overdubbing, or the professional term would be ADR, which is automatic dialogue replacement, where essentially if it's a upscale Hollywood movie, then typically you're gonna have good recording equipment on the set so you can get the dialogue there, but sometimes that isn't always the case, so they have to go back and overdub some things, and if there's typically fight sequences, they'll put in a few grunts here and there, you know, stuff like that, just to give the scene more realism. You can hear everything a lot more clear. The problem here is everything in this film, whether it be dialogue, Foley, sound effects, is all overdubbed, and the people that are overdubbing the characters are not the same actors to begin with. So right off the bat, there's an essential disconnect between what we are seeing and registering as the audience and the performances that the actors are. I don't even know if I can call them a performance, because they're really only there basically to move their mouth, if that makes sense. Because the people that are overdubbing these characters are not going to have, obviously, the same acting choices as the people on the screen. Now, granted, they do their best to try to mirror what they see on the screen, but it's definitely not the same. And I have to keep wondering why this was done. It could be that the actors that they hired for these characters weren't British enough, or maybe there was a huge audio problem and they didn't find out until post-production. Whatever it may be, it's one of the things that really brings this fan film down, in my opinion. It's just very distracting, and sometimes the voiceover is not completely lining up with the actor's mouth, and it's just very confusing. I had to watch most of the film in subtitles to sort of understand what they were even saying. And as is unfortunately typical with fan films, the acting is not Oscar worthy, I will say. And I'm gonna say half of it is the overdubbing problem, and the other half is certain character choices that are not realistic. But then again, this is a fan film, so it's not exactly fair to, you know, expect Oscar worthy performances out of these actors that have taken their time. And especially since this is a non-profit, this is people that have put in the effort and their time, and I'm assuming their money, because I know they couldn't have made money off of this, or Warner Brothers would essentially sue them for whatever they have. So I know they didn't make money out of this. So props to them for all this effort that they put in. But I will still try to review it as best as I can, only because it's definitely more well-funded than most I mean, you can see right off the bat between the visuals, the visual effects, cinematography, the camera that they use, it's very obvious that this is a well-funded project. And because it's Warner Brothers property, I have to assume this is coming out of their own pocket. So along with the ADR problem and the acting problem, the writing is not so great either. And, you know, the great thing about writing is it's not exactly restricted by budget. It's got some weird lines here and there that are a bit too campy for me. It's a bit tone deaf from the entire film in general, because the tone is so dark and, you know, gritty, and you're in this interrogation room and it's very intense. And then you have weird lines like Lazarus Smith's line where he wanted to marry Grisha and have wonderful babies with them is a bit weird and out of nowhere. It's a very lazy way of showing the relationship between these two characters. But yeah, it's got a few story problems. But I will say it's as many problems as it has. It has a pretty consistent pace. There were only a couple spots where I'm just like, this is so slow. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Now, I will say, though, getting to the good stuff about this film, is that it does what every Harry Potter fan film should do, which is build upon the original content. Now, a lot of the hits and beats of this film come directly from what we read in the Harry Potter books. But granted, they do take the time to try to make this their own world. Now, the problem with that is they use the same visuals, same props as the movies. So it's a bit of a balancing act, because you have the same wand from the film, you have the cup, the locket, you have CG Hogwarts, but they put their own spin on it, so I can't complain. Now, when Grisha is caught by these Russian Aurors, she is essentially hooked up to a Veritaserum IV, I guess, and she's being interrogated by, I'm assuming, the head Auror of the Russian Ministry of Magic, I can only assume. And he ultimately finds out that Grisha was there to find Tom Riddle's diary as a part of an ongoing investigation with the Ministry of Magic. Now, he asks her why, and then this is when we really get into the backstory of things. We get to this flashback sequence of Tom and Grisha at Hogwarts, and, you know, Grisha's sort of, like, kind of talking about the latest Quidditch match, and Tom is very not interested. And then she sort of makes an offhand comment about how it's probably the Muggle side of Tom that doesn't like Quidditch. And it's very obvious that this is a very sore subject from Tom, because immediately his eyes sort of glaze over and he's like, and this is where it gets a bit campy and the writing is but he kind of leans in and he's like, I will be the greatest wizard. There is no Muggle side of me. Which is all and good, but from what I read of the Tom Riddle in the books, and this is not considering his portrayal in the Harry Potter films, but what I read in the books is that Tom was not always Voldemort from the get-go. He was never evil, big bad evil. He's very much a victim of his own circumstance, being orphaned and then coming to Hogwarts and realizing all of this magical potential he has. And he slowly gets corrupted by these illusions of grandeur and living forever, and that's what truly corrupts him. I never saw him as a character that was bad from the get-go, because if it was, it would be a very one-dimensional character, and it would be hard to relate to him. So that scene was a bit off-putting for me. It was a bit tone deaf. But we keep going right along into this interrogation, and throughout the entirety of the film, we have flashback scenes weaved with this interrogation sequence between Grisha and the head Auror. And this sort of situation is not very conducive to the film style. As I was watching it, I sort of was watching it as more of a TV episode, because there have been a lot of TV shows that do this. So as the interrogation is going along, Grisha explains how she knows Tom, and it turns out that when Grisha was in school, she was with Tom, and she was also with these other two students, Lazarus Smith and Wiggle, Wiggleson. I think it's Wiglaf. I did not catch his last name. But they're essentially the heirs of the original Hogwarts founders. I was like, oh, this is very interesting. I could immediately see where it was going. There's always been this question why Tom Riddle chose these specific artifacts, like the cup and the locket, as his Horcruxes, as they are symbolic of each Hogwarts house. And as we see the film progress, it becomes very obvious as to what is going on. And we have this sequence in the room requirement. I guess they're in some sort of secret club because they're in the room of requirement. They have like this chant, and then Tom Riddle comes in and he's like, oh, very funny, blah, 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 blah. And this is at the end of his 7th year, I'm assuming. So he's about to go on to making steps to become Voldemort. So he comes in, and Wiglaf he has this weird eyeliner. I know they sort of use it as a distinguishing factor to when we see him later on in the film, but dramatic eyeliner on a Ravenclaw is just, it doesn't sit well with me, but it's a small factor. So eventually Tom gets into this duel with Lazarus Smith over Grisha, essentially, and that's when she says something kind of snapped in Tom. I think there's a moment where we see his eyes flash red, and you can see something is very different about him. He ends up breaking Lazarus's arm, although I thought he killed him for a second. So the gang is essentially broken up from there. I think Tom Riddle kind of put his foot down and decided he decided to cut off all ties with them. As the story goes on, we sort of get this scene with Hepzibah Smith and Tom Riddle, and this is, from what I remember, verbatim from Half-Blood Prince, where she's kind of, bragging about having the cup and the locket, and very quickly things don't turn out the best for her because his eyes go red and he gets very, dark, and something is definitely not right. I will say that the actor that plays Voldemort, Stefano Rossi, I think his name is, he is very good, and I think he would have been even better if his voice wasn't overdubbed. So essentially, we know what happens. He kills Hepzibah Smith, he takes the locket, he takes the cup, makes it a Horcrux, and eventually, the head order of the Russian department is convinced and content with what Grisha has told him, so he decides to let her go. And this is a very well done moment. As Grisha is walking up the steps, waiting to leave, he says, "Hey, how did you know that the diary was here?" And then she turns and her eyes go red, and it turns out that it was Voldemort the entire time. We got a bit of a Fantastic Beasts twist there. I'm pretty sure that there must have been some inspiration there. And I think it really speaks to Tom Riddle's character of how powerful he is, that he's able to transfigure his entire appearance. Not just his face, which was essentially what Grindelwald did in Fantastic Beasts. All he really had to do was, fix the color of his hair and his face, and I think that was good. He changed his entire body, his face, his hair. He added hair and a nose. And then the film sort of ends with this gritty, enemies of the air, beware. And it's all very thrilling, and then it ends. And then it's a bit anticlimactic, if I'm being completely honest. If I had to say there was any sort of climax within this movie, it would have to be the duel in the room requirement, because this seems a bit like an end credits scene, the way sort of formatted and where it was in the film. I thought there was a good at least 10 minutes after Grisha confronting him and then figuring out their feelings towards each other and then having some sort of duel. But no, it kind of ends there, and then you're left kind of, there's nothing to be gained from the film, essentially. I mean, yes, you have the connections between Voldemort and the heirs of the Hogwarts founders and why he decided to choose these objects as his Horcruxes, but at the same time, it feels like the film is going up, and then, it kind of just drops, and then that's that. One thing that sort of struck me while I was watching this film is the overabundance of music. I'm a big fan of less is more when it comes to music, and all 52 minutes was essentially music. There were certain parts where the music cut out when there was something very dramatic, like when Grisha says Horcrux and the music cuts out because we as an audience have that dramatic irony. It was almost like an opera almost. So you have this consistent wave of music underscoring the drama, and in some places it didn't really add anything to the scene. It was taking away. It was a bit distracting, if I'm being perfectly honest. And as it turns out, as the credits were rolling, not only was the music scored by Matt Steed, there apparently had also taken music from SoundCloud artists, which I assume they didn't take the music without letting them know, obviously. But now you have not only an overabundance of music, but now you have a lot of varying styles. And I will say, they all sort of fit the aesthetic of the movie, but it was very clear that the music was coming from different places. I like the idea that there were volunteers involved in the film in every facet of the production. I'm not sure how it stood to benefit from doing this sort of collage of different music. So looking overall, you know, like I said, visually it's very well executed. The story is solid enough. Overall, I'd say I give it maybe a 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10, somewhere in the B- range, because this film was definitely overhyped. Is that bad to say? Overhyped. It was a bit of a letdown. I don't know if it's because I'm a super Harry Potter fan. I was expecting a lot more, just what I saw from the trailer. But there was definitely a lot to be desired, especially what I feel about how the film ended. We have this great twist and then nothing. I will say the effort put into this film, and I know it's been a long time coming, because I remember months back when the trailer first came out, and I'm sure before that there were months and months and months of pre-production and casting and all that good stuff. So as always, reaction videos will be posted every Wednesday, and as for reviews like this, I'd like to do more in the future. I definitely love talking about this sort of thing. Hopefully Harley will join me in some of them. Anyways, don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I will see you guys next Wednesday for the reaction video. Ciao.